I want to begin with a very strange fact, one so obvious that nobody ever notices it. You have spent every single day of your life with yourself, and yet you have almost certainly never asked the one question that actually matters. Not what do I want, not what should I do with my life, not am I good enough. Those are all questions about the character in the story. The question underneath all of them, the one we skip past because it seems too simple to bother with, is this. What do you mean when you say I? Go ahead and try it. Say the word I. Point to it. Point to the thing you're talking about. When you say I am tired, or I am afraid, or I am not good enough, where is it? You'll probably point to your chest, or your head, or just vaguely at your whole body, as if to say, well, obviously all of this. But that's curious, isn't it? Because you also feel like a passenger inside that body, someone looking out through the eyes, listening through the ears, a little pilot sitting behind the forehead somewhere, steering the machine. So which is it? Are you the body, or are you the one who has a body? Nobody ever quite decides. And so we go through 70 or 80 years of life operating on an assumption that we never examined. Like a company running for decades on bookkeeping, nobody ever double-checked. I promise you, if you sit with that question for more than about 30 seconds, something starts to wobble. Not in a frightening way. Or, well, maybe a little frightening at first. The way it's frightening to notice the floor is actually mostly empty space between atoms. But mostly it's just interesting, because most of us are wandering around utterly convinced we know who we are. And that conviction is built on a foundation we've never once inspected. So let's inspect it. Let's take it apart, the way a curious child takes apart a clock, not to break it, but because the child suspects rightly that the ticking is more interesting than the face. Here is the first thing we notice. When we look closely, what you call yourself is mostly made of other people, not metaphorically, literally. The words you're thinking in right now, you didn't invent them. Someone taught them to you before you were old enough to object. The opinions you hold about what's a virtue and what's a sin, what's attractive and what's embarrassing, what counts as success and what counts as failure, all of that arrived from outside, from parents, teachers, advertisements, religions, the tone of voice your third-grade teacher used when she said your name. By the time you were 6 years old, you had already been handed a fully furnished apartment with personality. And you moved into it and you called it me. And you've been redecorating it slightly ever since, but you rarely questioned whether you wanted to live in that building in the first place. This is what I mean when I say that the self you take to be so solid, so private, so entirely your own, is actually a kind of construction project undertaken by your whole culture, using you as the building site. And once it's built, it does something rather sneaky. It forgets it was built. It starts to feel as natural and as inevitable as your own skeleton. You don't feel like you have a self. You feel like you are one, full stop, no further explanation needed, thank you very much. But watch what happens when you travel to a country where the customs are different, where the assumptions about time, politeness, family, and destiny are simply arranged another way. Suddenly you become aware, often uncomfortably aware, that your natural way of being a person was actually a very particular style, a regional dialect of self-love, not the one universal way that a human being is supposed to be. That discomfort is valuable. It's the first crack of light coming through a door you didn't know was closed. Now here's where it gets more interesting, because the construction goes even deeper than culture. It goes into the very architecture of how you experience your own thoughts. Notice that you experience yourself as a kind of continuous narrator, a voice in the head that comments on everything. I should have said that differently. Why did I do that? I hope they like me. I'm the sort of person who... This voice seems to be the real you, the essential pilot behind the eyes. But ask yourself, were you always this voice when you were an infant, before language arrived? Was there a running commentary? Of course not. It was just seeing, just hearing, just the raw feeling of the world arriving on your senses, with no little lawyer inside cross-examining. The commentator arrived later, riding in on the back of language, and it arrived so gradually and so early that you never noticed the moment the guest became convinced he owned the house. I don't say this to depress you. I say it because it's actually the most liberating fact you'll ever consider. If the self is something that was built, piece, by language and culture and repetition, then it can also be seen through, not destroyed, You don't need to smash the house to enjoy realizing you're not permanently trapped in one room of it. You just need to notice that the walls were wallpaper, not stone. Let's take a different angle on the same idea, because it deserves more than one approach. Think about a whirlpool in a river. You can point at it, you can name it, you can even photograph it and put the photograph on a business card if you're feeling ambitious. But if you try to pick it up, if you try to hold the whirlpool in your hands and take it home with you, you'll find there's nothing there to hold. There's only water, moving in a particular pattern for a particular while. The whirlpool isn't a thing sitting in the river. The whirlpool is something the river is doing. That is a far more accurate picture of what you are than the picture of a soul sitting inside a body like a pilot in a cockpit. You are not a thing that the universe contains, the way a marble sits inside a jar. You are something the universe is doing, the way a whirlpool is something a river is doing, the way a wave is something the ocean is doing. And this is not poetry for its own sake, it's a genuinely more accurate physical description. Every atom in your body was assembled from food, water, and air, all of which came from outside you, and all of which will return outside you. And this exchange never actually stops for a single second of your life. You are not a fixed object passing through an ever-changing world. You are a pattern of ever-changing material. That world keeps lending you for a little while, on the condition that you give it back later a little wiser, hopefully, or at least a little more interesting for having recently worn a human shape. Now, once you see this, the whole question of, am I good enough? Am I successful enough? Did I become who I was supposed to be? The whole question starts to look strange. The way a question about whether a whirlpool has done a good job of being a whirlpool would look strange. A whirlpool doesn't compare itself to other whirlpools further downstream. It doesn't lie awake at night wondering if it should have spun a little faster, been a little wider, lasted a little longer. It just does what water does when it meets a rock at a particular angle for exactly as long as the conditions allow, and then it becomes ordinary river again. No worse off, no failure, no tragedy, simply a completed pattern. I am not telling you to stop caring about your life. I am telling you that most of the suffering that comes from caring about your life comes from a mistaken idea of what you are supposed to be protecting, achieving, or proving. If you think you are a separate, isolated ego dropped into a hostile universe, then of course you'll spend your whole life anxious, defending a border that was never really there, trying to accumulate enough success, enough approval, enough security to finally feel safe. And it never quite arrives, does it? There's always one more thing to achieve before you're allowed to relax. That's not a coincidence, and it's not a personal failing. That's simply what happens when you build a life on a mistaken premise. You can polish a false idea forever, and it will never turn true. The way you can practice a wrong direction as hard as you like and never arrive at the right destination. Let me stay with this whirlpool image a little longer, because people often nod along with it and then quietly go back to believing they're a marble in a jar anyway. It's a slippery idea to actually live inside, not just admire from a distance. So let's make it more physical. Consider your skin. Most of us think of the skin as a wall, a boundary, the place where me stops and everything else begins. But look at what the skin actually does. It's full of pores, breathing the outside world in and out constantly. It's covered in nerve endings whose entire job is to register the outside world touching you, which means the skin isn't really separating you from the world so much as it's the very place where you and the world are in constant conversation. A cell membrane works the same way on a smaller scale, not a wall keeping the cell safe from its environment, but a permeable, intelligent boundary constantly trading material back and forth, because the cell would die instantly if it actually sealed itself off the way we imagine our skin seals us off. Even at the microscopic level, nature doesn't seem terribly interested in building the kind of hard separation our language insists upon. Its boundaries all the way down. And every single one of them turns out on close inspection to be more like a folded piece of the same fabric than a wall between two different fabrics. So when you say, I end here and the world begins there, you are speaking a kind of shorthand useful for practical purposes like not walking into traffic, but not an accurate description of the actual physical situation. Your body right now is exchanging gases with the room, exchanging heat with the air, hosting more bacterial cells than human cells, built from calcium that was once rock, water that was once ocean, carbon that was forged in the collapsing heart of a star that exploded long before this planet existed. The materials that make up you have circulated through countless other things before arriving here and will circulate through countless other things. After you are done borrowing them, you are less like a locked box and more like a temporary knot with the universe has tied in itself, admiring the knot for a while before untying it and tying a new one somewhere else. Once this really lands, and it usually takes more than one hearing, so don't worry if it hasn't fully landed yet. A certain kind of loneliness starts to loosen its grip. Loneliness, the deep kind, the kind that no amount of company seems to cure, comes from believing you are fundamentally cut off. A stranger, popped into a world of other strangers. But if the boundary was never as solid as advertised, then the loneliness was resting on a kind of misunderstanding, the way you might feel abandoned on an island only to discover at low tide that it was connected to the mainland by a strip of sand the entire time, and you simply never walked far enough to notice. There's a related trick worth exposing, and it has to do with control. Almost everyone at some point has tried to force themselves to relax, lying awake at 3 in the morning, commanding the body, relax, please, just relax, as though relaxation were a lever you could yank if only you pulled hard enough. But notice the strange logical knot in that command. The part of you doing the commanding is tense by definition. It's straining, gripping, working. And it's ordering some other part of you to stop straining, stop gripping, stop working. It's rather like clenching your fist as hard as you can while shouting at your fingers to open. The harder the shouting, the tighter the fist. This is why trying to force happiness almost always produces more misery, why trying to force sleep produces more insomnia, why trying to force confidence produces more visible nervousness. The forcing itself is the problem, not the lack of whatever you're forcing. The people who seem to have the most ease in life, and I don't mean people with the fewest problems, I mean people who carry whatever problems they do have most lightly, are rarely the ones straining hardest to fix themselves. They've simply stopped fighting the current so violently that they can finally feel it carrying them somewhere useful. This isn't passivity, and it isn't giving up. It's closer to what a good dancer does with a partner who's leading. You don't resist every movement, and you don't go limp either. You feel the direction of the momentum and add your own grace to it. Most of our exhausting inner light comes from resisting a current we've never bothered to actually feel, fighting a partner we've never bothered to actually dance with. Let's talk for a moment about time, because time is where this false self does most of its damage. Notice that anxiety almost never lives in the present moment. Sit with that claim for a second, because it's testable right now in your own experience. In this very instant, are you actually in danger? Are you actually being harmed right now as you sit here? Almost certainly not. What you are doing, if you're anxious, is running a simulation, a little movie theater in your head, showing previews of a future that hasn't happened, or reruns of a past that's already over and cannot be changed by any amount of replaying it. And who's the audience in that theater? The constructed self, the narrator, the one who believes he is a fixed thing that needs to be defended across time. The present moment doesn't need that kind of defending. The present moment is simply what's here. It's the imagined past and the imagined future, both of them, notice, existing only as thoughts occurring right now, that generate almost the entire weight we carry around. This is not a suggestion to stop planning or stop remembering. A life with no memory and no foresight would be an unworkable life. It's a suggestion to notice the difference between using thought as a tool, the way you'd use a hammer, and being used by thought, the way you might be used by a hammer that had somehow gained control of the hand holding it and wouldn't put itself down. Most people are not thinking. They are being thought continuously by a mechanism they never chose and rarely inspect, and they call the resulting whirlwind a worry myself, as though the storm and the sky it's happening in were the same thing. Here's an experiment you can actually try tonight, lying in bed. Instead of asking, how do I stop thinking, which just starts another thought about stopping thoughts, try asking, who exactly is bothered by these thoughts? Look for that one directly. Don't answer too quickly. Really look. You'll notice something curious. You can never quite catch the one who's aware. Every time you try to observe the observer, it seems to have already slipped one step back, the way your eye can never see itself directly, only its reflection. That's not a malfunction, that's a clue. It suggests that the awareness you actually are is not another object among objects, not another thought among thoughts, not another thing that could be threatened or flattered or improved upon, but something more like the space in which all those things, thoughts, feelings, sensations, the whole parade, are allowed to appear and disappear. Once you notice that, even briefly, something rather wonderful happens to your relationship with your own flaws and failures. You stop being quite so identified with them. You can watch anger arise the way you'd watch weather arrive without concluding, I am an angry person. A conclusion that, notice, only makes the weather more likely to return, since now your very identity is invested in the storm. You can watch fear arise without concluding, I'm a coward. a label that will follow you around and shape your choices for years based on nothing more solid than a passing cloud you mistook for the whole sky. I want to bring in another image here, one you may find useful long after tonight. Think of the universe not as a machine, cold and mechanical, grinding along with no purpose, and not as a stage where a lonely little you struggles against an indifferent backdrop. Think of it instead as something more like a game of hide-and-seek that has been going on for an extraordinarily long time. Every person you've ever met, every animal, every star, every wave in the ocean, is a place where the totality of things has temporarily hidden a piece of itself from itself, just so it can have the pleasure of finding itself again. You sitting here feeling separate, feeling like a lonely observer peering out at a world that is not you, that feeling of separateness is not a mistake. Exactly, it's part of the game. It's the hiding part. But it was never meant to be the whole game. It was always meant to eventually give way to the seeking to the moment you notice, with a kind of delighted shock, that the seeker and the hidden were never actually two different things to begin with, any more than the front and back of your hand were two different hands. This is why when people have genuine moments of insight into this, and they happen to ordinary people all the time, not just monks on mountaintops, sometimes triggered by nothing more dramatic than watching sunlight move across a wall, the most common reaction is laughter. Not hysterical laughter, but the laughter of recognition, the laughter you feel when a magic trick is revealed and you realize how simple the mechanism was all along, and how thoroughly, delightfully it had you fooled. Oh, people say, it's like that. Of course. How obvious. And how did I miss it for so long? There is nothing grim about this realization. It is, if anything, the punchline to the cosmic joke, and you are not separate from the joke. You are one of the places where the universe is currently laughing at itself. There's another mistake worth examining, one that quietly ruins more lives than almost anything else, and it's the assumption that life is fundamentally like a journey, and a journey is only worthwhile if it arrives somewhere. We treat our whole existence like a trip to a destination. You get the good grade so you can get the good job. Get the good job so you can get the good house. Get the good house so you can finally relax and enjoy things, once everything is properly arranged. But notice, if you actually watch people who achieved every single item on that list, that the relaxation never quite arrives. There's always a next rung, quietly generated by the same part of the mind that promised the previous rung would be the last one. This is because life isn't actually structured like a journey with a destination. It's structured much more like music. Think about what you're doing when you listen to a piece of music you love. You are not waiting anxiously for the piece to end so you can finally enjoy it. If that's what you were doing, you'd have wasted the whole piece of music, waiting for something that, when it finally arrived, would just be silence. No, the whole point of the music was the music. Each note, as it happened, dissolving into the next note. Probably it ends a symphony hoping the orchestra will hurry up and get to the final chord. And yet that is precisely how most of us have been trained to treat our lives. As a piece of music, we're rushing through, impatient for the final chord, as though the final chord, when it arrives, will retroactively justify all the notes we failed to actually hear along the way. If you really absorb this, you'll notice it changes what success even means. Success stops being a fixed point on the horizon you're sprinting toward gasping, and becomes something closer to how skillfully and joyfully you're playing the note you're currently on. A good musician doesn't play the third note badly because she's anxious about the ninth note. She trusts that if she plays this note well, the next one will take care of itself, the way it always has for every piece of music that's ever been played. There's an old teaching story, found in more than one culture, about a group of people digging a well, and a small child sitting nearby asks the diggers when the well will finally have water, and one of the wiser diggers laughs and says, "The water was here before we started digging. We're not creating anything, we're just removing what was in the way. Your ease, your worth, your completeness, it's rather like the water. It isn't a future reward for enough digging. It's what's underneath the digging the entire time, waiting for you to remove just enough dirt to notice it." This brings us to the roles we play. Because most people's sense of self is stitched together almost entirely out of roles. The responsible one, the funny one, the reliable one, the one who never gets angry, the one who always gets angry, the smart one, the one who takes care of everyone else and never needs taken care of. These roles usually got assigned early, sometimes by accident, sometimes by necessity, and we wear them so long we forget we ever put them on. There's nothing wrong with playing a role. A good actor can play a villain brilliantly and go home afterward perfectly capable of kindness. precisely because the actor never confused the mask with the face underneath. The trouble starts only when we forget we're the actor and start believing we are nothing but the mask. That if we ever stepped outside the role, even for a moment, we would simply cease to exist. This is why people cling so desperately to roles that make them miserable. And the martyr, who can't stop sacrificing even when nobody's asking her to. The tough guy, who can't cry even alone in his car. Not because the role serves them, but because they've quietly come to believe the role is the only thing standing between them and complete non-existence. But you were never the mask. You were always the face wearing it. And faces, unlike masks, don't need to be earned, defended, or perfected. So a face just is what it is. Whatever expression happens to be crossing it in this particular moment, entirely acceptable exactly as it looks right now, with no committee vote required. Now, I can already hear the practical objection forming, and it's a fair one. This is all very lovely as an idea, but I still have to go to work tomorrow. I still have bills, relationships, a body that gets tired and sick, a reputation to manage. What good does any of this actually do me? Here's the good it does you. Most of your suffering, not all, but most, is not caused by your actual circumstances. It's caused by the story wrapped around your circumstances. The story that says this shouldn't be happening, that you are uniquely unlucky, that if you were truly worthy, this wouldn't be your life, that your value as a person depends on resolving it a particular way. Strip away that story, even for a few minutes at a time, and the circumstance itself becomes far more workable. A problem faced by an open, curious attention is a genuinely different problem than the same circumstance faced by a defended, terrified ego trying to protect an imaginary boundary. You'll notice if you experiment with this, that your best decisions, your funniest jokes, your most loving gestures almost never come from the anxious, calculating narrator. They arrive seemingly out of nowhere in the moments when that narrator has briefly gone quiet. Athletes call this being in the zone. Musicians call it the music playing itself. Writers call it the sentence that seemed to write itself better than anything they could have planned. In every case, what's actually happening is that the small, defended self has stepped back just for a moment, and something larger, more skillful, more alive, has been allowed to come through unobstructed. That something was never a stranger. It was you all along, minus the interference. So the invitation tonight is not to become someone else. It's the opposite. It's to stop working quite so hard at the exhausting, endless project of manufacturing and defending someone else. The character built out of other people's opinions, old fears, borrowed ambitions, and instead notice what was here underneath that project the entire time. Quietly, patiently, never actually in danger, never actually lacking anything, never actually needing to become anyone in order to already be complete. Try this before you sleep tonight. Instead of running through the list of things you did wrong today or the things you're afraid of tomorrow, simply notice that you are breathing. You didn't order this breath. It simply happened on its own, the way your heart beats on its own, the way blood moves through you on its own, the way, in fact, the entire universe has been quietly arranging itself for close to 14 billion years to finally produce this exact breath in this exact body on this exact night. You are not a passenger who happened to wander into that immense process. You are one of its current expressions. The same intelligence that spins galaxies, that grows orchids into shapes no engineer would dare attempt, that turns caterpillars into flight. That same intelligence is currently right now keeping your heart beating without asking your permission or requiring your supervision. You did not have to learn how to be alive. You simply are being lived moment by moment by something far more competent than the anxious little narrator who's been taking all the credit and all the blame. There's one more piece of this worth examining before we close, because it touches nearly every ache we carry, and that's the habit of comparison. Almost every form of quiet misery you'll ever meet in another person or in yourself traces back eventually to measuring your particular note against someone else's particular note and finding yours wanting. But think again about the orchestra. Does the oboe feel inadequate because it isn't the trumpet? Does the cello spend the performance wishing it could be the flute, sulking in the back because it wasn't given the flute's part? The very beauty of the piece depends entirely on each instrument doing its own unrepeatable thing at its own register, in its own timbre. And if you replaced every instrument with the same instrument, you wouldn't have a better orchestra. You'd have no orchestra at all, just one very loud, very lonely sound. And yet we do this to ourselves constantly. holding our particular unrepeatable configuration of talents, wombs, humor, and history up against somebody else's entirely different configuration, and scoring ourselves as though we were one correct instrument everyone was supposed to have been assigned, and we alone got it wrong. Nobody else has ever had, or will ever have again, your exact accumulation of years, laughter, mistakes, and quiet private jokes with life. That's not a comforting platitude meant to make you feel better about being ordinary. It's simply mathematically, factually true, the way no two rivers carve the exact same path down a mountain even when they start from the same rainfall. The particular way you notice things as a child, the particular jokes that only make you laugh, the particular ache you carry from a particular loss, nobody else in the history of anything has had that exact combination, and nobody else ever will. Comparison asks you to become a copy of a different, unrepeatable pattern, which is not just unkind, it's structurally impossible. Like asking a river to flow uphill into a different valley altogether while still somehow remaining itself. None of this means your choices don't matter, or that you should stop striving, stop building, stop trying to become better at the things you love. It only means the striving can come from curiosity and play instead of fear and lack. A wave doesn't rise up out of the ocean because it's afraid of not being a wave. It rises because rising is what the ocean is doing in that spot at that moment. And it's genuinely, uncomplicatedly enjoying the shape of itself while it lasts. You can build your whole life the same way, not out of the terror of not being enough, but out of the sheer delight of finding out what shape you feel like taking today, knowing perfectly well that whatever shape you take, you were never separate from the ocean that's taking it. So the next time you catch yourself asking, am I good enough? Am I successful enough? Have I become who I was supposed to be? See if you can pause, just for a breath, and ask the older, simpler, far more useful question underneath it. Not what should I become, just what is actually here right now before any of the labels arrive. You may find, as so many have found before you, quietly, without any need for announcement or applause, that what's here was never missing anything to begin with, and never will be, no matter what the next chapter brings. And that this, of all the things you could have discovered about yourself tonight, might just be the one that actually stays with you long after you've forgotten every word I said to get you here.